Welcome to Excel Magic Trick number 1013. Hey, if you want to download this workbook 1013 to 1016, click on the link below the video. In this video here, we have some employees, and we need to calculate the min and the max for each one of the employees. This means we're doing a calculation with a condition. So instead of using the min function on all the numbers, we need to do something like min if it's employee 2, employee 1. So min max calculation with a condition. Now, there are COUNTIF, SUMIF, AVERAGEIF functions that do calculations with a condition, but there's no MINIF or MAXIF. So what are we going to do? No problem. There's two situations. One is if you have a single criteria, we can use dmin and dmax. If we have multiple criteria and we want an easy way to create a formula and copy it, then we have to switch over to either MINIF, MAXIF, those two functions in combination, an array formula, or use the aggregate and make an array calculation in the array argument. Now, if you only have a single criteria and you're allowed to have a field name above the criteria and your data set has proper field names, no problem. The easiest way to go is just to use the dmin. Now, the dmin says where's the database, field names at the top, so records and rows. And then comma. The field says, hey, which one of these fields do you want to calculate upon? You can do this a couple different ways. You can either click right on the field so it knows, hey, it's the amount. You could also type it in double quotes. Or because it's the second column in the data set, you can simply put the number 2. Any of those will work to say for the field argument. And then criteria, field name, criteria below. And then we enter it, and it can calculate it. Now, the dmax, same thing, the whole database, comma, I'm going to click on this one this time, just like that, comma, and the criteria, field name, and the criteria. And there we go. We've calculated the min and the max for employee 1. Now, if you don't have Excel 2010 or later, you can't use the aggregate. But no problem. There's been a method that we've been using for years in Excel. You simply do the aggregate function you want. In this case, it's min. And instead of highlighting all the numbers, we're going to use the if function to help us filter. So actually, I'm going to do it here. Equals min. We don't want all the numbers. We just want 50, 100, and 150 dumped into the min. So we simply use the if function. Now, this logical test argument is expecting a single test that returns 1 true or false. But we're going to give it a whole bunch of tests, meaning the whole column. And I'm going to hit F4. And I'm going to ask of that column of values, is anything equal to this relative cell reference, which is our criteria. Now, this is an array operation. We're doing a comparative operator here, and it's operating on more than one value. That makes this an array calculation. Now, if I click on this and hit the F9 key, evaluate, you can see, sure enough, our array operations returns more than one true or false. Those trues will help us create a filter to get only the numbers that we want. Control Z, comma, the value of 2. Hey, these are all the numbers. F4. Now, what we'd like to help our filter is we don't want to put in this last argument. If we leave it out, the if function will put false anytime the criteria is not met. So we close this off, and let's check out what this evaluates to. F9. Ah, perfect. The falses are put in where it doesn't match the criteria. The numbers are because we matched our criteria. Now, the min is programmed to ignore the falses, so it'll work perfectly. Control Z. Close parentheses. Now, we're making an array operation here. We need to tell Excel that this is an array formula, and you have to do it with a special keystroke. You have to hold Control and Shift down and then hit Enter. That's us telling Excel we're making an array formula. If you look up in the formula bar, you can see those curly brackets. That's Excel saying, hey, I understood that you want me to calculate an array formula. Now, that was the min. We can simply, I'm going to cheat here. I'm going to copy this in edit mode, Control C, escape. Come over here, put it in edit mode, Control V, and I'm simply going to change IN to AX. So now the max is on the outside. The filtered values on the inside will deliver to max just the values. I'm going to use Control-Shift-Enter. I see those curly brackets up there. I copy this down, and sure enough, for employee 1, we have our proper min and our proper max. Now, notice that the if returns an array of values for our max or min calculation, falses and numbers. Now, and the MAXIF combination required Control-Shift-Enter. If you have Excel 2010 or later, we can use the aggregate function. Now, aggregate is amazing. There's a bunch of functions. There's a bunch of functions that we can use. But the problem is 1 to 13. 1 to 13, those do not allow array calculations. But 14 to 19 do allow array calculations. Now, we're interested in the min and the max. But check this out. There's a small and a large. And we can say, hey, get the small 1, and it's the same as min. I can say, give me the large 1, meaning the first largest number, and it will give us the max. So I'm going to put 15 in for our function number, comma. Now, we're going to get some errors from our array calculation. So I'm going to use number 6 for the options, comma. Array. Well, we used the if up there, but that if function will require Control-Shift-Enter no matter what other function houses it. So here's what we have to do. We highlight the values we want, hit F4, and then we're going to divide by. In parentheses, we're going to make our array operation, which helps us to filter the values. So I'm going to highlight that whole column in F4. Are any of you equal to our relative cell reference? Close parentheses. Now, we had to use these close parentheses because this equal sign is a comparative operator. And all comparative operators are calculated in Excel's hierarchy of how it calculates after math operations. So we want this to calculate first to give us our trues and falses. F9. Now, what will happen is the numbers here will be divided by a false. It will be like dividing by 0, so we'll get a divide by 0 error. But the numbers that correspond to the trues, the true will be like dividing by 1. I'm going to Control-Z, so check this out. I'm going to highlight that array and F9. So here our filter is not like the if. It doesn't have falses. It has divide by 0 errors. That's why we had to put that 6 over here. I'm going to Control-Z quickly. Now, for the min, we have to do division. If I had used multiplication to help us filter, watch what happens when I F9 it. Zeros. Because false times any one of those numbers gives us a 0. That won't work for the min calculation, Control-Z. So for min, or anytime the zeros would mess up your calculation, you can use division and that 6 in the aggregate. Now, comma, the K, remember this is small. That's what 15 means. You could put 1 for min, 2 for second smallest, 3 for third smallest. I'm going to put a 1. And guess what? Why are we even using aggregate? Because in some ways, this seems a little bit more complicated than our MINIF. The reason why is that array argument there inside of aggregate for functions 14 to 19 can handle array operations. So watch this. Enter. I click there, and there aren't any curly brackets. It calculates without having to use Control-Shift-Enter. Now, I'm going to do my same little trick. I'm going to highlight this, copy in edit mode, come over, escape. And then I'm going to come over in edit mode and paste. Now, what was our function number for large? 14. You can look here, right here. Again, 14 and 19 handle array calculations. None of the earlier ones do. And we absolutely could leave this division here. Watch. It gives me the right answers all the way down. But let's compare and contrast. This is an example where since we don't have any negative numbers or zeros in here, we can use multiplication. And not only that, but this second argument here, if we get this list, I can say ignore nothing because I'm never going to have any trouble. The zeros are not going to mess up my max calculations. I have a note here. If the zeros won't mess up the max calculation, then go ahead and use multiplication. All right, so that 14 will give us the max, and then copy it down. All right, that's a bunch about calculating min with a condition and max with a condition. My latest book that's almost out, I'm shooting this on July 12th. It should be another week or two. The ebook and the DVD are already available at MrExcel.com. The DVD's at Amazon. There's a whole section in the book just about this, and even shows you some cool tricks for using D functions when you need to copy it, when you mix them with a data table. All right, see you next trick.